Katie, welcome.
Thank you.
So, we've known each other from Instagram.
Yeah.
You're also a self-published author. You're also a teacher. So, I'm interested to know about you, about your life, about your books, and of course, about your future. Tell me about where were you born?
I was born in Oregon. I grew up outside of Portland, Oregon on a tree farm. And we had about 20 or so acres, and it was just like Christmas trees. So it was a really, really fun, idyllic childhood, you could say. We had a lot of pets. I grew up with a ton of animals, which if you hang around with me on social media or read my books, that's a big part of who I am. I'm a big animal lover. So yeah, and I have 2 younger brothers and my parents. And so it was a really close family, fun childhood.
When I think of Oregon, I think of mountains. Am I correct?
There's like one big, like when you're in Portland area, there's one, it's called Mount Hood. It's like the one really big pointy mountain. It's pretty. A lot of trees. And then where I live now in Montana, like that means like in Spanish mountain. And so that's the big Rocky Mountains. And so there's mountains all over where I live. So very pretty.
Tell me about your siblings. How many did you have?
I have 2 younger brothers.
2 younger brothers.
Yeah.
And how many years were you apart?
Our middle brother, Dave, is 18 months younger than me, and he's a teacher and awesome. He lives here in Montana. And then my youngest brother, Danny, is 5 years younger than me, and he lives in Texas.
Another teacher then?
Yeah. Yeah, and we all do history. My dad was a history teacher, and so...
Oh, that explains it. Your dad was a history teacher.
Yep.
And did he teach in high school?
My dad teaches still to this day. He teaches middle school, so 8th grade U.S. history. And then both my brother and I went on to teach high school.
Did you read a lot when you were young?
Yeah, huge reader. My most favorite books are Wheel of Time. And I started reading The Wheel of Time when I was like 12 and fell in love. I love fantasy books. I love animal books, adventure, history. So I was reading since the beginning. My dad took me to get my first library card, and I love libraries still to this day. But yeah, definitely went a lot. Love fantasy books. My dad's a huge fantasy reader, so that's where I get it from. So started out with like the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter, and then The Wheel of Time, Brandon Sanderson, and nowadays I read everything, George R.R. Martin.
So I get that you're interested in fantasy from quite an early age. You also read a lot. How did you get to the point where you said, I want to write about unicorns? How?
Yeah, this is my book, my unicorn book. Uh-huh. But I love unicorns. I don't know. I grew up liking what are they called? My Little Ponies, or some of those The Last Unicorn, all those stories as a kid. And then my grandpa, when he passed away, he left me a painting, and it's of I could even show you, or I can send you a picture. It's like kind of a gritty looking unicorn, and it's in a painting. And so it just looks so different than anything you'd ever come across, or that I'd seen before. So I always looked at it and kind of wondered, what's the deal with this unicorn? It's not all sparkly and rainbows and pristine. It looks kind of like dirty and kind of dejected. And so I eventually just kind of crafted the story around that. So I tried to, in my mind, I kind of made up like the back story for this unicorn in a painting.
Your grandfather painted?
No, he left it to me. It was just something he had in his possessions. And he knew I loved it as a little girl, so he left it to me when he passed away.
That's a nice story, actually. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
So,
I wonder if you can see it.
Sure, show it.
Can you see it? It's on the wall over there. I could walk it over closer, but it's there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were a youngster with a lot of imagination, interest in stories. So tell me about the teenager Katie. What were you like?
A go-getter. Teenager Katie was really ready to kind of get out there and change the world or see the world or whatever. I was involved in everything. I love to sing, and so I was a big choir girl. Besides reading, I love to sing. And so traveled and did some different choirs. I was student body president, so student council of my high school. That was a big part of who I was. And yeah, loved organizing events, being involved, community service, helping people. So, but then in my spare time, I grew up in the country, because even when we moved, I grew up in Oregon, but then when we moved to Montana, we lived, and we had, we had 40 acres in Oregon and 20 acres in Montana. So we had a big chunk of land here, and we had horses. And so I was just kind of out in the country as a kid and teenager with my brothers, and you kind of had to have an imagination to have fun. That was before, all the computer and cell phone and social media stuff. So we would pretend to look for dinosaurs. We would be Power Rangers, or we'd try to dig up like Native American arrowheads or go on some quest. So we were always playing around outside.
At what point did you decide to become a teacher?
I think growing up with my dad being a teacher, I remember just anywhere, as a kid, seeing students run up to him at the grocery store or the gas station, hi. And so I always thought it was so cool. But it wasn't until college I actually declared political science. And so I thought I was perhaps going to go into law or pursue something kind of maybe like social justice or international relations. I wasn't sure. But once I was in college, I found that I actually gravitated, even in my political science classes, more toward like the historical time period and the president and, whomever was in charge and the administration. So it wasn't even more like the politics that were holding my attention. It was the history and the time period and the people. So I ended up then saying, you know what, I guess I'm just like my dad and I'm going to study history. So then I declared history. And what are you going to do with just a history degree? You kind of, you could work at a museum, but I live in Montana. So I figured history education was a safe bet. It would give me more opportunities. And it was good. I taught for 6 years and I loved it. I love kids. I think teenagers are so funny. They're brilliant and smart and darling and fun, but they're also stubborn and they can be challenging, and so it was just, you never knew what you're going to walk into each day. It was like, okay, wow, So it was just a fun adventure. Primarily, I taught sophomores, which here in the U.S. that's about 15-year-olds. It's like the second year of high school, and I taught world history. And so that one's my favorite. I love traveling. I love learning about different cultures, talking to people in different countries, that kind of stuff. I just think it's so fun. So that was my favorite. But then I also taught U.S. history, which would be like 16, 17-year-olds. And then I taught Montana history for seniors, which would be like 17, 18-year-olds. So I kind of had a spectrum there, like 15 to 18-year-olds, and it was fun.
Let's talk about your writing journey, because in my experience as teenagers, we have to write assignments in school, we have to write essays and so on, but it doesn't translate to actually writing a book. And I've also found that in order to write a book, you first have to have a motivation to write. You have to have a passion, a desire to do it. So what caused you to find that motivation to write?
I think I always kind of thought about it, even growing up, but I'm not one of those people. Like, I didn't have a collection of stories from high school, or I love stories. Like I told you, I love telling stories. I love reading stories. I have a big imagination, but I didn't really even ever think about writing until I was like 23 and working as a substitute teacher. And my book I was reading that day, I finished, and I had nothing else to do while I was subbing. And I was overseeing like an English class, and they were taking a test. And I had a notebook with me, and I had nothing else to do. And for some reason, I had been thinking about that painting my grandpa gave me. And I just started kind of doodling and writing. And pretty soon I just kind of started writing out this idea, just kind of popped into my head, and I just started pursuing it. But I didn't take it seriously for a couple of years. It just was kind of fun, but I don't think I even realized that I was writing an actual book until a couple of years in, because I've never written a book before. Like you said, it's a big undertaking. It's different. And then I would just kind of work on it during school breaks or holidays, summer vacation. And then it was once we adopted our daughter in 2017 and I quit teaching, that I really looked at it again and thought, what am I going to do? I didn't want to be a full-time teacher while we brought this kid home. I wanted to be available to her, to help her attach and get used to life with us and be more available. But I still had a lot of time on my hands. And so I thought, I could maybe write a book. So I would say it was 2017 when I really shifted into like, I'm going to do this. And then I did it. And I wrote this one.
Right. Nice.
Yeah. And then it came out in 2019. And then I think having a completed book and releasing it and having readers, respond and feeling more confident. And then I've been able to pump out 3 more since then. So
you've written 3 books in a series, Navaria. How did you come by that name?
Yeah. I think at that time,